Okay, so we're looking at the spiral lines today. And the first thing I want to do is just so we remember where we're at, because we look at 5 full body lines and we've done 3 already. We're doing number 4 today and number 5 next time. So let's just, kind of regroup and just look at what we've seen so far. So I've got the 3 lines we've looked at so far on the screen right now. And we looked at the superficial back line first, and that's on the back side of the body, of course. It's a full body line, and we called it, just for shorthand, the backbone of the body. Or, I find that in class, I often just refer to it as the back body. So you don't have to use all the words superficial back line, but you can if you want. Okay, so I find like the simpler you can make it, the better. And so that's on the back side of the body. We'll talk about in a minute maybe some of the qualities of it. Then we looked at the superficial front line, which basically balances with the superficial back line. And we call the superficial front line the shield because it's kind of reactive and it protects our most vulnerable parts. And then we looked at the lateral lines. And the lateral lines do overlap a little bit with the superficial back line and front line, but they're mainly on the sides of the body. Superficial front and back lines motivate movement and stability on the sagittal plane. Remember that? So that's this plane that we walk on and do sun salutations on. And then the lateral lines help to contain that forward movement, that forward and backward movement. And it also, governs the sideways movements as well. So that's kind of why they're called the main stabilizers of the body. They sort of stabilize those sagittal plane movements, which is, we do a lot of that in life. And then it can motivate and control those sideways movements as well. And, as I said, there is some overlap between these lines. We're going to look at that a little bit more closely today because the line we look at today has a lot of overlap with these lines. And we would expect that in a tensegrity structure. So I've got my tensegrity model here. And, we just have to keep going back to this and remembering why these things kind of overlap at all these intersections, because it creates a kind of leverage, really, for these shape changes that these kind of structures are able to undergo. So as I said, we'll see a lot in the line we're looking at today. Okay, so let's just take a minute though and let me know if there's anything particular. Let's just take the superficial back line. What was it that was kind of your main takeaway for the superficial back line? Like, was there something that stood out for you, or something that you found was really useful in teaching your classes, or, really showed you something in your body? If anybody wants to share anything about anything at all like that, what's a kind of a main takeaway about the superficial back line for you? Some kind of personal experience or something you saw in your students, or maybe you've been incorporating it more into your classes. What is there for you? What was the big takeaway? You can raise your hand if you can suggest something, or just unmute your mic. I see movement. All right, Nicoletta, what do you know? What would you like to say about the superficial back line?
For me, it's a very, very important line for me personally.
Okay.
Because I had my back broken
Oh,
and I
okay.
have to work always this superficial back line
Okay.
in order to support my my bones, my column bones. So
Yeah.
I am always insisting in my classes to keep the back side straight and to keep the shoulders rolled backwards and down. And I'm really careful with this one because of my personal
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
So this is my takeaway. So now it's a bit more clear for me. And thank you so much for this.
Have you found some ways to activate it? Because you're talking about you want it to be strong, right? So how do you activate it in your classes?
Um, So actually, I'm not doing anything specific in order to activate, but I'm just staying in Tadasana with my class, and I'm trying to put them to scan all these areas, front line and back line and the lateral line, and to dial out
Right.
the feet, and also to feel the buttocks very active, and also the not to be very curved in the lumbar side. So it's just a scanning, and every time when I am working with my classes, everybody is very, very happy because they get conscious about their body, and it's really very important for them. And in the back line, it's always the small movement of the big bone, I don't know, I
Sacrum?
don't have its name now. Yes,
Sacrum?
sacrum.
Yeah.
Yes, this is also very important. So I I've heard a lot of people saying that, wow, this is really interesting, and this is really something that makes me feel good and makes me realize that I have a bad position in the office, and I have to
Right.
work this part, because otherwise I'm somehow stuck. And when I'm trying to ask them to activate and to push the sacrum out, just to make the cambration on the side, it's also very difficult because most of the people are staying like this in the office.
Oh, I
So
see. Yeah.
it's, yeah, and then moving the bone, the big bone of the in the middle, it's really, really difficult, but very, very useful for them. So, but it's not mainly for the about the backline and activating the backline,
Okay.
but for me it's scanning actually.
Oh, you use
it
scanning.
it
Okay.
worked.
Yeah.
It worked very, very,
Yeah.
very well, because otherwise people do not understand all the muscles, and I cannot talk about lines and for everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
Some
yeah.
of them maybe, but
Yeah.
not all of them. But scanning and feeling the activations in the back side, in the lateral side, in the front side, it's really, really very useful and very powerful for them.
Excellent.
This is my experience actually.
Okay, fantastic. And I think the better you know your body, the more accessible all of that is as well. So I'm going to just make a suggestion though, and you guys can try this with me right now if you want. So if you want to just stand on your feet, if you're able to do that, I would suggest just lacing fingers, putting the hands to the back of the head. And, a lot of people who are at desks, even if they're at their desk, they could do this and sitting up really nice and tall. And then keep the chin a little bit tucked and just press the head back into the hands. And you can already feel the upper aspect of this line becomes active. So if I'm saying how do you activate that line? That's a simple way to activate that line. Now, once you're sensitive to that, I think pressing into something gives you a bit more of a sensory experience, right? You just feel it more. And then, once you've been there, you can usually just sit up tall and you'll feel that line because, it's in opposition to that downward force, right? You're lifting up and pressing back into it. So, once you have that experience, and then to activate the lower half, you simply need to kind of do what the skeleton is doing here with the right leg. If you just take the right leg behind you, boom, this line is active. Yes, you can probably feel glutes, and glutes are not part of this line in terms of it's at a different level and part of another line, but you can feel your calves and your hamstrings and their connection to the pelvis, and you can probably feel the back muscles kick on too if you just take one leg back. So just a couple of really easy awareness practices to give them a strong experience, and then they can usually access a more subtle experience. It's just more obvious to them. So just a suggestion. And as Nicoletta says, it's a very important line. It's holding you upright, and it does have a tendency to collapse at the other end, just for a few different reasons, because all these bones and everything have quite a lot of mobility, and we have the weight of the head sitting on top. So, everything we do tends to be these forward actions, head forward actions, and so we're naturally getting pulled down and forward. And this line can succumb to that. So that's one of the dysfunctions that we see. But, just simply practicing a better position, right? And putting your body into positions where it has to maintain that position, which we can easily do in yoga. So that can help us retrieve a better position out of a bad position if we're sitting at a desk for a long time or just standing or whatever we're doing for long periods of time in our life. We can just kind of correct our posture because we know what it feels like. So giving people things to feel, I think, is really important, however you do that, like whether that's a subtle practice or a stronger practice. So let's talk about the superficial front line. So we called that the shield of the body. Did anything come up for anybody, with regards to this line, a new understanding or appreciation, or perhaps, something to work on, or something that you tried with your classes, anything at all? And not everybody at once. Come on, somebody's got something. It could be a little thing. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering.
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
So for me, it's also important keeping my back straight. So standing high and tall and perfectly straight, and
Yeah.
also a bit with the neck straight and the
Yeah.
chin a bit down. So this is a good activation. So I'm doing sort of activation, let's say, for Tadasana. I'm
Yeah.
telling them how to posture, and then I'm making the scanning. So this is
Excellent. Perfect.
my way.
Yeah. And like again, if back issues are something that your students are interested in addressing, then the front line is actually very important. It's not like the back line can sort of correct everything on its own, right? The front line needs to be in balance with the back line, and it's very important. And remember, we said, these are more of the fast twitch muscle fibers, so they react quickly, but they can tend to be lazy. Whereas these muscles have no choice. They have to be on all the time practically. So these, because they're endurance fibers, they're just a different fiber type, different energy system, whereas these ones are a different one. So they kind of do have to be how we would say trained. They just have to, it has to be practiced. It has to be made habitual through practice. So this is very important, and especially if you're working with people who have back issues, making them aware of their pelvic position and whether or not they have their shield turned on, and if they have this balance, they're creating balance between the front and back lines. So those are really important things to take away from your awareness and your learning about those lines. So can I move this over?
Yeah.
Myself? Okay. So I'm just going to move it over so we can look at the lateral line now. You could put it in the middle of this screen if you want, just so I can see them again. So, oh, okay. So now we'll look at the lateral line, and remember, these are the main stabilizers of the body. So I don't know. I feel like because so much of what we do are on these sagittal planes, or it seems like that, especially, Tadasana, walking, sun salutations, these kind of things, even squatting down and picking things up, it can seem like that's where the action is. So when you start learning about the lateral lines and their ability to stabilize these movements, a lot of people, I feel, are sort of insensitive to their lateral lines. And if you look at them, there's just a lot of fascial tissue. This is a lot of collagen here. Now, that doesn't mean the collagen fibers are insensitive, because remember, like, the fascia has a lot of sensory receptors. It's just that I think when you have movement, you have a bit more awareness of that because of movement. Movement always increases awareness. But I mean, in life, I'm not talking about meditation here. But these side body lines, sometimes they're just, people are just out of touch with them. You say it that way. And they're just not really aware of how, when they kick on, or how they use them, or whatever. So I'd be interested to know if in working with the fascial lines, or just working in your classes, if there was anything useful that came to you about the lateral lines. So, hint, they are active, right, when we organize and activate. So that's one thing. But anyways, anybody else want to Okay, Nicoletta, you want to say again? You're welcome to. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you again for the exercises for the knees and for
Oh, good.
the ankles. So that was really really useful, and also working a bit of lateral lines and in
Mm-hmm.
order to stabilize the knees. So that
Yes.
was very
Excellent. I'm really
great
glad to
for me.
hear that. Very, very
Thank you.
good. Yeah. Good. Okay, Donna, you want to give your 2 cents worth? Oh, we can't hear you. So something about your.
Yeah, it's not giving audio signal from her.
Yeah, it's just not giving an audio signal. I don't know if that's your connection or what the dealio is. Do you want to put a question or comment in the chat?
Lee says, I did most of your lateral line class last week and they loved it.
Okay, so Lee is telling me that she used the lateral line, I guess the attunement probably, in her class last week, and her students really liked it.
They commented how they noticed how strong they were.
They noticed how much stronger they were. Yeah, yeah. So this I think this tapping into these lateral lines and the line we look at today, which is a spiral line, people are really surprised at how much more stable they are. Your joints, as we looked at when we really looked into the joints specifically, they're very slippery. They're designed to be really, really slippery. So you do need a way of stabilizing them. Now, the thing is, at first, you have to put some conscious control into that, right? Like, so we learn how to organize and activate. But, if you practice that enough, practice it in your daily life, practice it in your yoga practice it in any activity you do, taking things out of the car, lifting a child, then, it becomes a habitual and you don't have to, put that conscious energy into it. But, because your body has lots of patterns, right? It develops patterns quite quickly. And if you keep practicing a pattern, yeah, you're going to habituate that. So that's really the idea. We don't want to have to put a lot of conscious effort into it, except, when you're learning a new movement pattern, that is what it takes. So in time, your body's going to learn this pattern and it won't take so much conscious effort to do it. And it'll just be the way your body moves. And again, that is so we have a good long-term outcome. And as I say, I've been working with this for about 7 years now, and that's what I hear again and again. People just cannot believe what a difference it makes, especially in things like yoga where we're challenging our balance on one leg and things like that. So, they really get to test it out. So, yeah, so really, really good stuff. Donna, is your mic working now?
Oh, yeah, she's there.
Yeah.
Is
There we
it?
go. Yep.
Oh, okay, good. I don't know what happened there, but anyways, I was going to say about the superficial backline, all three of those ones you just spoke of. I have come to the point now where I can't not turn one on with it doesn't. How do you turn them on separately, really?
No.
Yeah, and I do a lot of hiking. I do a lot of walking, and that's so I've been really working with my feet. I had a calf issue
Yes.
the other day, which I think happened because of using my feet so much
Uh-huh.
that went up into my back. I think I asked you about that, but
Yep.
And the ball rolling was the next day it was gone.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Yeah, so the myofascial ball rolling is amazing.
it is. Yeah.
But I still find when I'm going back and forth on my feet, turning the off and on, I have a hard time not engaging or activating the lateral line with doing the back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
On the back,
Yeah.
and then the front.
Yeah.
For me, it's just automatic to dial my feet out, which automatically turns on the lateral line. So I have when you ask to separate them now, I'm like, is that a trick question? Or?
No, it's not. And I would say this whole time, we've never been able to activate only one line at a time. It's just that, you can take your awareness to one aspect or one thing at a time, but they're all participating together. You're going to see
exactly. Sorry, I was just going to say exactly. It's just that before me personally, I didn't think of them like that. Now, when you learn about them individually, now practicing them all as a whole, it's hard to just turn off one or the other. You feel unstable. It doesn't,
Oh
it's
yeah, yeah,
not.
you're not going to be able to now. Yeah, it's sort of like an initiation experience. Like you didn't see it before. Now you see it. You can't unsee it. Then you learn the next one. You didn't see it before. Now you do. Now you're practicing with it and you realize, "Oh, I that's always going to be there now. It's not like it, you can switch that off and on." So as soon as you like see something, it's exactly the same in hands-on therapy work. You know, you, once you know what's under that tissue, you're never going to be able to go back to not knowing. You know what I mean? Like it's a cumulative learning, and yeah, and it's kinesthetic too, which is really powerful. So yeah, you're always going to be yeah, you're working with all of the lines. Wait till you see, like when we get into the deep front line, there again, you're going to realize like, okay, if I organize and activate, which seems to be about the lateral lines and the spiral lines, that's going to turn on my deep front line too. Like there's just you can't prevent it. So anyways, that's what's up ahead. So great stuff. Okay, and now I want to tell you that, even after all these years, and I've been, studying this, conveying these concepts, which again means that I have to really work it out in my own brain. And then I'm working it out in my own classes with my own students. I'm still learning new illumination sort of thing, about these lines. So it's just gonna keep getting richer and richer as you work with it. So just get the basic concepts down and then practice, and that's really gonna show you new things all the time. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, and we'll start looking at the spiral lines. Yeah. Oh, there's a question or something?
Well, Lee just said that she has a student with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and she loves the activating.
Oh, good. All right. So Lee has a student with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, is a connective tissue disorder, which affects the collagen fibers. So they're not as strong, and they don't have as many in their connective tissue. So they are very prone to hypermobility around their joints and to joint injury too. They often injure their joints. They tend to be unstable and a little bit not as strong. So Lee has a student who's working with that, and believe me, they do show up in yoga classes. And she's finding that the activation is making the student feel so much more stable. So we also, way back, I don't know what coaching call, Shannon was sharing with us how she doesn't have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but she has, hypermobility around her joints, pretty soft connective tissues, very pliable, and it has actually created a lot of anxiety. So she didn't realize like that. Starting to organize and activate and getting stronger and more stable around her joints, or developing the ability to stabilize, reduced her anxiety significantly. So these things kind of go hand in hand. Instability is a very profound situation for your nervous system to handle, and it can make you a little bit more anxious in general. And we do find there is a correlation between conditions like Ehlers-Danlos or general hypermobility syndrome and those kind of things, and anxiety. So just something to be aware of. So you're helping your students and yourself in numerous ways at different levels of your beingness by working on stability first and giving this pattern of organizing and activating as a way to create that sense of stability and groundedness, and just in control of your physical body. This is a very it's soothing for the nervous system, we'll put it that way. So just, kind of an interesting aside there. Okay, let's start looking at the spiral lines now. Now, again, there's two spiral lines, a right and a left side. And of all, well, I don't know, I was going to say of all the lines we've done so far, these ones are a little bit more complex to map out on the body. So, just think of it this way. You kind of have spirals and loops and crossovers in this line. So you can see the right and left lines are crossing over in the front of the body. They cross over again at the back of the body, and they loop around the foot. So, that's is a very interesting line. It kind of we start this one at the top. The other ones we started at the bottom, but we start at the top. It loops around the foot, wraps around the body, and ends up at the top again at the head. So, you know, it is kind of unique that way. Its most important attribute is dynamic stability. Now, dynamic indicates movement, right, or action, and stability means that these actions are basically well coordinated. It would really be coordinating action. Okay, so now that doesn't mean it doesn't have a stability component as well, and we encounter that and play with that a lot in yoga. But I feel like that facilitates and enhances any dynamic movement that we do as well. So we'll look at that a little bit today. So the spiral line is really key to things like walking mechanics. And it, you know, if you skate or if you run or you know, any kind of locomotion in the body, the spiral line is very important in that, and we'll look at some of the ways it does. And it coordinates all rotational movements. So even if, you know, you're seated and you're rotating, it's also involved in that. And it actually is a true spiral when you're on your feet and using the whole body. So, you know, again, it doesn't involve the arms. It's just the legs, pelvis, spine, thorax, neck, head. So the whole central column of the body. But if you're on your feet and you're working with the spiral line, you're truly spiraling. So this is really interesting to me because you can rotate just, you know, from the pelvis upward, but the spiral comes in when you're working from the feet. So we'll have a chance to look at that. Okay, so now last time we talked about the lateral lines, and we talked about this lattice work that's sort of happening on the side, right, at the side of the trunk. You're just seeing the superficial layer here, which the fibers kind of go diagonally this way. Underneath that, there's another layer that go diagonally this way. And so it's as though this side is laced up. And now we talked about how that is important in rotation, but it's kind of more checking rotation so you don't get over rotation. It allows rotation, but we only want so much rotation, okay? So I would say this is kind of maybe restraining rotation with the lateral lines because their main job is stability. You don't want over rotation, whereas the spiral lines, they're intentionally rotating. Okay, so you have to have this balance between the lateral lines and saying only rotate this far. And again, it's not good, bad, it's not alignment or not alignment, it's just about efficiency in these dynamic movements. Okay, so we talked last time about how you can waste a lot of energy with all the sideways movement if you're walking, because you want your energy moving forward, not losing it off to the side like that. And the spiral line, what it wants to do is allow rotation, but it's rotating and still staying on that forward plane. So the lateral lines are kind of on the sides, just governing that that's not getting sloppy. It's nice, relaxed rotation. It's efficient. Okay, so that's kind of how those two work together. Sort of like the superficial front line and back line offset each other. The spiral line and the lateral line also kind of offset each other on the side bodies. Okay, so let's look at, it has to be mentioned again that all the lateral lines, just kind of like Donna was saying, you can't activate one at a time. And the more you know about them, the more information your nervous system has, you're going to start realizing that, every posture you go into has an element of spiral line. It has an element of lateral line, an element of deep front line. All of these lines are active when we're active or we're stabilizing or we're in yoga postures, except Shavasana. Okay, so, but all these lines, they overlap, they cross over, they merge together, and all of this is, kind of why we look at the body as a tensegrity structure. Okay, it's why the tensegrity model is pretty good way to understand how the body works as sort of a structural whole, where one part is providing leverage, another part is providing movement and coordination and these kind of things. So there is going to be, it is a network, and it is going to overlap and reinforce in places, and just completely cross over in others. So we'll look at some of those connections. And again, as I said, this provides some leverage for dynamic movement. And when we look at the spiral line, we're going to see how this is going to help facilitate and stabilize movement in various planes too. Because when we look at yoga, we're not just walking or running on one plane. We're spiraling, right? We're rotating. We're leaning to the side, we go front and back, so we're doing all movement in all of the different planes. So this is going to help us do that. So I'll just say one more thing about the spiral line, and then we're going to kind of follow the pathway of the spiral line. I think maybe this image down here is best, so you can see that it's on the back body here, it's on the side body here, it's on the front body here. Kind of toward the front of the leg, then toward the back of the leg, and up the back body here. So it's really kind of coming into the front, the side, and the back body, but not the center body, right? Not the inseams of the legs, pelvic floor, diaphragm, not in here. So it's sort of wrapping around all of the other structures. So let's go on to follow then the pathway of this line. Oh, okay. First, we're going to talk about this. So some examples of spiral action. So I mentioned how walking, running, and sun salutations are on this sagittal plane, but we do a lot of spiral movements, and you may not have thought of them as that. Okay, so when you're bringing your right shoulder toward your left hip, or you're standing on your right leg and swinging your left leg forward, your body wants to spiral. We're going to do a little experiment and try something in a moment. So this kind of mimics what we're doing. Say if you throw, you're loading by going back, and then you release by going forward. That's a spiral action. If you're swinging a tennis racket, that's a spiral action. Even if you're holding a baby on your hip, she's holding it on her right hip. Her left shoulder wants to come around toward that direction, So a lot of things, what we do. And then in movement, picking something up from one place and putting it into another place is often going to involve, a spiral or a rotation if you're on your feet, or a rotation through the trunk. Okay, and then we can play with some really interesting rotational and spiraling movements in yoga. And, whether we do that in something that's challenging, like on the feet, or whether we're lying down, it's a good exploration because, again, people often don't think about putting themselves in these spiral positions in terms of resting into them, where you can just rest and breathe and let things fall in. People either sleep on their side, or they sleep on their back, or they sleep on their stomach, or we don't usually sleep in a twisted position or rest in a twisted position. So even that is kind of stimulating for the nervous system to lie in a twisted position side to side. Okay, so just some experiences that are we can have in life. Now, the spiral line influences head position as well. It's also affected by the body following the gaze. So this is something to keep in mind. It doesn't have as direct a connection as the superficial back line to the optic nerve. But again, this is the way the body is wired, and those erector spinae muscles that are also part of this line are influenced by head position. So again, you're going to see that if you want to rotate to one side, and you look to one side, that's going to get the whole body to rotate to that side with a greater ease. Okay, so we'll look at head position a little bit, and then it interacts and influences the other full body lines. All right, so now let's look at the location. And I just put this cool image here because, we see a lot of spirals in life. In nature is what I mean. Lots and lots of spirals. So there's no surprise. I mean, even organization and activation is a spiral, right? That activation is a spiral from the feet to the core, or hand to the core. Those are spirals that we're working with. So, the limbs spiral onto the trunk of the body. And then we're going to look at the trunk spiraling as well. Okay, so I'll talk you through the right side of this line best I can, and maybe you can palpate with your fingers at the same time. So if we start on the right side of the occiput, and the occiput is the bone at the back of the head. So if we start over there, we're going to immediately cross under the shoulder blade. So between the shoulder blade and under the shoulder blade to the opposite side. So if you can just take your left hand, kind of put it on the shoulder blade a little bit, and your finger at the back of the right side of your head, just kind of sense between those two. You could probably even draw your left shoulder back and turn your right head and just go off and on a few times and just feel like, okay, I got that connection. Okay, and then from under your shoulder blade, your left shoulder blade, okay, so if you can kind of squeeze down on that a little bit, that's your serratus anterior. It wants to pull the scapula forward. Okay, so if you let your shoulder come down and pull your scapula forward, you might feel a little bit of quickening under your fingers. So then that's going to come across kind of at the level of the navel, approximately there. It's kind of going through the abdominal aponeurosis, which is located, I don't have my mouse right now. Where'd it go? Oh, thank you. So you see it weaves under this abdominal aponeurosis, which is a multi-layered piece of fascia. Remember, aponeurosis, that means multi-layered fascial sheath. Okay, so it goes through that, it weaves through that to the opposite shoulder. So now we're on the right side again. Okay, so right side of the hip, your tensor fasciae latae is a little bit of a chunky muscle, just see where your hip bone is, just down in here. This makes it look like it's way down here, but it's really in here. Okay, so just getting off that bone. And if you want to feel that, you could just stand on your left leg and just lift your right leg out to the side a touch, and you would feel that muscle really turning on. So that's your TFL, or your tensor fasciae latae. Now, that muscle tensions the fascia lata. The fascia lata is the deep fascia, most superficial layer of it, that covers the whole thigh. All of that. That is the fascia lata. Now, in the fascia lata, there's a reinforcement, a whole bunch of thick connective tissue that goes in very, very straight line down to the knee. That's your iliotibial tract. It's a reinforcement in the fascia lata. So your tensor fasciae latae tensions the fascia lata, which really tensions the iliotibial tract, and that is what we're turning on when we organize and activate, because this is really strong stability for your knee, and we just don't have the same kind of structure on the medial aspect of the knee, only on the lateral. Okay, so we've got this very strong structure here, and look at it blends right into your tibialis anterior. So if you want to feel that with your hand, you're on your right leg again. We started at the back of the right head, we went over to the left thorax, over to the right hip. Now we're still on the right leg, and your tibialis anterior, see that this is the blade of your tibia. If you just go to the outside of that blade, that the muscle that's most superficial is your tibialis anterior, and you could kind of flex and extend your ankle to feel that become active. And this is the one that goes under the foot. Okay, so if you pull your toe toward your knee, you can see there's a great big tendon that sticks out, and it dives to the inner aspect of the arch of the foot. Okay, that's your tibialis anterior tendon. And then we looked at last time, we're going to look at it again today. It crosses, it attaches at the big toe, and then carries on to this fibularis, or some people know it as the peroneus longus, and goes up the other side. So we're going to look at another slide in a moment, but let's go back to this idea here.
There's a question.
Oh, there's a question? Okay.
Donna wants to know, is the spiral line over or under, stop touching the mouse, is it over or under or combines into the lateral line?
Yes, it merges with the lateral line. Can I go back a slide? Okay, so I need the mouse now. So where the lateral line would encompass the whole iliotibial tract, which, has various widths. Some people, it's a little skinnier than others, but it's, a broad fascial sheath. The spiral line, according to Tom Myers, is more toward the front edge of the IT band, and then it uses the biceps femoris on the backside. So we'll look at that, but I would, in my mind, in terms of how we move and what we experience in movement, which to me is the most important information, is what we actually can feel and experience. I would simply understand it as merging with the iliotibial tract, just like the lateral line does. Okay, there's no need to differentiate that at all. Okay, so that's what I would say about that. Now, can I do this myself? Okay, so let's once again just take a quick look because, again, this is so important to the spiral line. Last time, I got really excited and I wanted you to see the stirrup under the foot. Now, as I've said over here, the peroneus longus and the fibularis, remember now this is the right foot and you're looking at the bottom of the right foot. It crosses under, right? This goes right across underneath of the foot over to the base of the first metatarsal. Okay, this is the metatarsal of your great toe. Okay, so down here. And so that's exciting. This is part of the lateral line, this insertion of fibularis longus. But in the spiral line, there's also this connection with tibialis anterior that we just felt with our fingers. Now, interestingly, tibialis anterior is part of the superficial front line and the spiral line. Okay, so that's where those two merge with each other. I would rather say merge than cross over. So that is a continuity. So what we're really looking at, these lines are continuities where tension is transmitted as a continuity. And so that's why sometimes they're going to sort of overlap with each other. We can take different pathways. We can just be mainly challenging, activating the lateral line, and we can mainly be challenging the spiral line. In both cases, you're going to activate the iliotibial tract because it's the main lateral knee stabilizer. Okay, so in both cases, you're activating that same fascial structure. Now, we could split hairs if we were doing dissection. We could look at that and say, okay, it seems like the fascial continuity for the spiral line is mostly active through this anterior portion of this iliotibial tract, whereas the lateral uses the whole thing. So, but to me, there's no need to differentiate like that when we're talking about our experience in movement and how to stabilize movement, etc. Okay, but for some people, they really want to know all those small pieces, and obviously welcome to it. So the other piece of connective tissue we can see here is the tibialis posterior. That's a deep calf muscle. So you've got a couple of, you've got some deep, some more superficial ones, right, which are part of the superficial back line, the gastrocnemius. But this one is deeper, so it's closer to the back of the lower leg bone. And this one also supports the arch of the foot, and this is part of the deep front line. So you can see that we've got 4 fascial lines coming together, basically, under the arch of the foot. So again, to me, that just indicates its importance because they're all coming together. Okay, and this is kind of a way of imagining it, as coming under the foot like a stirrup. A real horse person would say, well, a stirrup doesn't go to the outer aspect of the knee. It comes from the the medial aspect of it, right? Up against the horse side of the leg. But well, we're just going to say, well, it's a model. It's not perfect. Okay, so so we saw last time I was kind of excited to talk to you about this great toe connection, how important the great toe is to movement in general, but also to the arch and to the ankle function and knee function, etc. Pelvic floor function. We're going to see again when we look at the deep front line the relationship between the great toe and pelvic floor function. So we're just getting a few layers maybe of the same information, but again, that's just so you know how important it really is. Okay, so the arch of the foot again is, and this is a pretty good image of when the foot becomes a rigid lever. You know, leverage is very important in the body, and this is again what our tendinous fascial structures do for us. They give us a kind of leverage so that dynamic movement can happen, or even stability can happen, especially if there's, you know, a balance challenge going on. So, you know, this is kind of like the push off when you're walking. Obviously, this is going to be a push off that turns into, I don't know, a cannonball maybe, or a dive or something like that. But, you know, the foot is actually has a springboard action, a very stiff springboard action where, you know, you need to have both the ability to completely relax the foot and for it to act as a rigid lever. So, you know, that's kind of our parameters of what the foot can do. And that action is very important to maintain. And I feel like, again, you know, with shoes, without practice or whatever, these are capacities that are lost, and they deeply affect the whole body. Like, you know, Nicoletta was talking about back issues, but back issues could actually be foot issues. They just seem like back issues because that's where you're getting the pain, and the feet are not really complaining. So, you know, again, there you go. Give attention to the feet, make sure you're maintaining those arches, and there's lots of ways to do that in yoga because, you know, it's just amazing that we're practicing in bare feet. Okay, any questions before we carry on?
Not that I see in chat.
Okay. All right, wonderful. So we're going to carry on with the spiral line location and look more at the back body. So we've been under the foot. Now we're going to come up the side of the leg. So I'm going to stay on the right side because we're looking at the right spiral line. So I'm staying on the right side. These are the peroneals. Those are right on the very side of your lower leg. And if you tilt your foot out to the side, you probably can feel those become active. And they blend right in with the iliotibial tract, but also with biceps femoris, which is one of your hamstrings. You have a set of hamstrings there. So you've got longus and brevis in your biceps femoris. But that means you have the long and the short. And then you also have two heads of the hamstrings coming down to the medial knee, okay? But we're just, you know, the spiral line just incorporates this one. So, and that's, you know, in concert with the iliotibial tract. So you've got this one is coming out from this fibular bone straight up here to your sitting bone, remember? And then it's going to cross back again. So we started on the right, we went over to the left, back to the right, under the foot, and from the right, we're going to go left, okay? And up the erector spinae to splenius capitis and cervicis to the back of the head. So the right spiral line starts on the right and ends on the left, and the left starts on the left and ends on the right. Now, what I would say is to keep this as simple as possible is if you want to just remember that when you're standing on your left foot, you're connecting to the right thorax through the spiral line. And when you're standing on the right foot, you're connecting to the left thorax. And it is that connection from right hip to left thorax, left hip to right thorax. Those are very powerful connections. Okay, and we use those all the time in yoga. We use them in walking too. So I'm going to have you try something with me now. If you wouldn't mind being on your feet. Okay, so you're just gonna get on your feet and stand up straight. And then just take your right leg and stick it forward as though you were gonna take a step. Okay, so you're gonna stand in good posture, straight up and down, and take your right leg forward, knees straight, toe lifted to the ceiling, like you're gonna take a step, but don't take a step. Okay, so if you hold your leg in that position, experiment in your body and tell me, does it make more sense for your right shoulder to come forward when you do that? Or does it feel more natural for your left shoulder to come forward and your right shoulder go back? Okay, so then try it on the left side and then kind of go to both sides and just see what feels more natural if you lift the leg forward. Okay, and now I'm going to get you to experiment with taking your leg back. Okay, so if you're standing on your left foot, take your right leg back. What does the body want to do? Does it want to draw the left shoulder across toward the right, or does it want to draw the left shoulder back in the, toward the other side? Okay, let's try that on the other side. Stand on right foot, left leg goes back. Makes more sense to take the right shoulder back or the left shoulder back. Okay, one more experiment. Okay, so stand on your left, and now right leg goes forward. Draw your left shoulder toward your right leg, and then swing your right leg back and take your left shoulder back. Okay, so when you swing your right leg forward, left goes forward, left shoulder goes forward. When you swing the leg back, left shoulder goes back. Couple more times. Let's do that on the other side. Left leg forward, right shoulder forward, left leg back, left shoulder back. Okay, so basically if sometimes when you're trying something out like that, your brain just won't work. You just can't feel what you're supposed to feel. So don't be hard on yourself, but this is a good little practice to do on your own. I believe we did it in the attunement, actually, for the spiral line. But it shows you how you're wired for walking. Because when your right leg goes forward, you can feel it wouldn't make sense for the right shoulder to go forward. You would walk, you'd look like you're walking like a two-dimensional being, not a three-dimensional being. So as you swing your right leg forward, your left shoulder is going to go forward, and that's how we walk. So these crossbody actions, are kind of governed by the spiral line, and there really isn't anything more important than walking. Walking is the fundamental, upright, long-strided walking is the human being gift, or whatever, is what makes us completely unique. Besides many other things, but in terms of our movement capacity, it gives us enormous options, but that is the one fundamental thing. If you lose that ability, then you're very, very limited. So that's the way to think about it. Now, the other thing, if you wouldn't mind trying that, just sort of walking on the spot and letting your trunk do a bit of rotation, maybe even letting your arms swing, you might also get a sense of the way. Again, you may still be thinking of it as a superficial back line, but even the spiral line is part of these erector spinae group, and that's kind of like having a rod or a mast or something around a central point around which you're rotating around. Okay, so you've got your right leg connected to your left thorax, and you have something that your body is rotating around. And that is what, these erector spinae muscles help us do. And again, when we're doing rotated postures in yoga, we're very much need to feel our axis, basically, which is the spine and the support of the erector spinae. All right. So if there's no questions, we'll go on. And I should give you a little warning. Okay, these pictures are a little bit gristly. They are dissection pictures. So just, brace yourself if you're squeamish. Okay, so now I wanted to just go back and just account for why we're seeing overlap in these lines. Okay, so let's just look at some examples of the fascia for real. Because here's the thing, okay, when actually all science is like this. There's like the science we can conceptualize, and we might use things like logic to conceptualize them, and imagination, and rules, right? And then you get faced with reality, whatever that is. So we look at in our case, okay, we're looking at these fascial lines. We understand the concept of tensegrity, that kind of makes sense. But when we're in our body and we're moving our body, what is it that we're experiencing? What's really there? So that's why it's useful to actually look at the tissue, and then, that can be helpful, but ultimately you need to trust what you can experience, okay? What you can feel, what you can experience in your body, that is much more important than any concept, okay? And that's why I say again and again and again, you have to try all of these things out. You've got to try them because they'll be verified in your body. That's the only place they can be verified for sure, is in your own experience. So when we look at the fascial lines, I want to help you understand the multiple layers, right? And let's just remember what the fascia does, right? It's transmitting tension forces throughout our body tissues. And you can know that because they're so stripy. And they wouldn't form this way unless they were formed along lines of tension. And we learned by things like mechanotransduction and everything, it's actually polarizing the fibers so they're going to be laid down straight in a certain direction. Okay, so it's not haphazard. What you're seeing here, like these yellow bits, that's not, it's connective tissue, but it's not fascia. This is fascia. See how straight those lines are? You can just see through a few layers. These are the fascia coverings. So I don't know what part of the body this is, but this could even be the fascia lata that we're looking at. Remember the fascial covering of the whole thigh. So the fascia lata could look like this, and then you could peel back this layer, and then there would be compartments more like this, although this is the arm. But there's layer upon layer. They're all transmitting tension. Some muscles are cooperating with others and all of that. So it's kind of messy down in there, but you can really feel these straight lines of collagen being tensioned when you're organizing and activating, and when you're practicing yoga and doing other activities as well. Okay, so the fascial lines are really made of this deep fascia. Some of them are more reinforced than others, and they surround the muscles, their tendons, ligaments too, and bony attachments, right? It's just covering everything, and it's transmitting tension from one tissue to the next in many times, especially in yoga, like throughout the whole body, these full body postures that we tend to do. Okay, and transmitting tension at multiple levels. So again, this is a pretty good picture to show that this is actually the biceps tendon. So, when you bend your elbow and you can see that tendon sticking out. This is the end of the biceps tendon before it continues on. And you see how a tendon just flows into the fascia of the next muscle, basically. Okay, these are your inner forearm muscles. And you can also see there's places where that dives in between muscles. So we're going to look at another example of that in a moment. So this is the IT band retracted. So again, this would be the fascia lata. And you can look along here. I don't know how totally obvious it is, but there it is strongly reinforced right there. That would be the IT tract. And this could be wrapped back up over the quadriceps muscles. Now, if you want to try something with me, you could take your fingers down the side of your thigh, and once you wrap your fingers around the back of the knee, kind of over here, you're going to feel a couple of things. You're going to feel a really straight edge of a tendon. And then right here, you're going to feel another pretty thick, ridge. And that's your IT tract. This is your biceps tendon. This is your IT tract. So if you kind of go between your IT tract and follow this edge up, just know that it's going to dive. Let's see if I can get a better picture. Oh, I can't. That's too bad. We'll use this one. So this is your IT band. You see there's going to be what we say an intramuscular septum. I don't know if you guys care about this, but the tensor fascial lata and the fascial lata and the strong IT band wrap around one of your muscles, your vastus lateralis, and attaches to the bone in here. So that's what's happening here. See this edge? This would continue down around this muscle and attach onto the femur, your bone. Okay? And then, of course, on the other side of this, which we can see over here, it's continuous. So this piece here is diving between the muscles onto the bone, but you can't see that because it's seamless on the outside. So we would have to literally dissect that to see that. So this is why I say, like, you can't, we're looking at a model, the fascial trains, right, model, and as best we can, we're following these lines of tension. They're actually pretty easy to follow. You can get in there with a scalpel and separate these different layers and stuff. But when it comes to movement, I'm not sure how useful it is to, decide, well, how many fibers of the IT tract are part of the lateral line versus the spiral line. So, I think we're fine just understanding that that's a very strong structure that's influenced both by the lateral lines and the spiral lines. And, you might wonder why I'm, splitting hairs like this. And it's just because you may encounter that one day. You may encounter somebody who's like, oh, the fascial lines have been debunked. And what I want to say to you is that if it helps you understand how the body operates, then it's useful. And if you can have the experience of stability and organization and activation in the body and have some understanding of the tissue you're tensioning and how you're using that, and it's a useful thing to improve your practice and improve the longevity of your body and all of that, well, then I don't think we really need to split hairs about that. But that does happen. It does happen out there. And I think that, again, if we, when we look at these images of dissection and everything, it just helps you understand the reality of the body. There are many, many pathways for tension to be moved through the body. It enables us to move in all kinds of dynamic ways. And I hope that this tensegrity fascial line model is helping you appreciate that, because we're not sort of like robots. We don't just do that. We're just so dynamic, so fluid, and we just have so much movement potential. Okay, so if you're okay with that, we'll go on to the postural function of the spiral line. Now, we've already talked about organizing and activating, so that's one way. That as soon as you organize and activate, you're ready to go, right? You have your foot to core connection to a pretty good degree, and you're organized. You've got your knees stable, arches lifted, pelvis is stable. Now, from there, if you want to start to move dynamically, then The lateral lines are going to help contain that movement forward so it's efficient, but the spiral lines are going to encourage that rhythmic rotational movement. So it's monitoring this rotational movement through the trunk and through the pelvis. It happens in both places, unless you're a very uptight Canadian, in which case you might walk with no hip movement. I understand other places in the world there's a lot more hip action happening. So it's always such a blast to play with walking and different walking styles and stuff in workshops. I just absolutely love it. You learn so much from that. But in the comfort of your own home, you can play with, well, what if I walk with my hips, with my pelvis really stiff? What does that do to my walking mechanics? What if I let my hips sway from side to side? What else happens when I do that? So, you can kind of see like how everything affects everything else, as we know. And, what's the real role of the lateral lines, in channeling my movement forward and keeping it nice and efficient? And what's the role of my spiral line, just encouraging this kind of rhythmic rotational action that again is very efficient. It's movement around an axis, and it enables a nice easy arm swing and easy leg swing through your gait cycle. So that's all wonderful to notice and really interesting to play with. Okay, so we really looked at we looked at the superficial back line and front line and lateral lines in terms of what happens at the pelvis, right? I mean, the pelvis is such a hub of movement and stability, and it really needs to have good awareness and control around the pelvis. So, this is also, the spiral line is also influencing that. And when we look at the spiral line, where the IT band is very important, and that stirrup under the foot. So that is just a little extra layer. Imbalances at the ankle, whereas like pronation or supination, that can affect the iliotibial tract. Remember, iliotibial tract here is a real tissue structure. It's a reinforcement. And a lot of people have IT band friction syndrome. Not a lot of people, but you do hear about it. Often runners, sometimes cyclists. And it's usually right about here, right before the knee joint, that they will get some irritation. It's often been called friction, but really it's compression. It's basically as this fascia gets tension, there's a very highly innervated fat pad under here that keeps getting compressed, and it can get really inflamed and angry. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, I shouldn't say that. It depends on what world you're in. In the yoga world, you're not going to hear about it as much. In the running world, you would hear about it all the time. So it just depends on who you're running with at the moment. But so having an imbalance in the foot, ankle, in the gait, always repeating the same gait without much change. So that often happens on a treadmill, or maybe an asphalt surface or a cement surface where you're not dealing with a lot of variation in the terrain. Also, maybe not dealing with much hills and things like that. So if the gait's always the same, and sometimes you tend to get irritation. So just an interesting thing to know if you've ever suffered with that. And if you have questions about that, I have quite a lot more information if you're interested. Okay, so postural function is organization and activation, and we're going to see lots of yoga postures where we're using the spiral lines, and then incorporating those nice easy rotation into walking and running. Okay, so let's look at some of the yoga postures where we're using these lines. And I guess this gives us a unique experience. Again, even though we do lots of small rotational movements in life, a lot of people never experience full rotational movement and full body, full spiral movement like we can do in yoga. So this is just such a great, it adds that variety to movement experience that keeps our proprioceptors sharp. And this is really important consideration, especially for older adults, If you're teaching older adults, make sure you're getting them to do spiral patterning, because that is one that they can lose if their movement life has really shrunk down. Okay, so let's look at these multiplane movements. So, multiplane is where you're moving, crossing planes, basically. So this is movement. There's standing on, we'll call that the frontal plane, and then rotation around the transverse plane. So that's already a multiplane action. And here we're bent on the sagittal plane, but rotating through the sagittal plane. And this would also be transverse plane, just relative to the spine position. So again, multiplane actions. And then full spirals like this, where, your body is spiraling now, right from the foot. It's kind of dialing outward and then spiraling back, and then the head's coming back. So it's like a long, slow spiral pattern in the body. And then, to add interest, we take a foot across, so there's another spiral coming from this foot to the opposite shoulder. So, these, again, are very stimulating for the nervous system, and anyone who's practiced this posture knows that it's pretty challenging in terms of keeping your balance and strength in that posture. And of course, as I always say, like, the organization and activation is going to help you achieve this pose, because you would know that you need to keep your arch lifted and dial your standing knee out. And then this leg, you want to, if you have your hand on your foot here, it's ideal, because you can dial your hand out, your foot out into your hand, which is going to keep this hip down, keeping your pelvis a little more level. And that makes it a little cleaner for you to spiral through the spine. So, it kind of puts things in position so that there's more ease when you're trying to challenge that position, if that makes sense. And again, here's another spiral pattern from the back foot through the trunk of the body. They're not always end range spiral positions, but it's a balance challenge as well. And so anytime you're making a hand to foot connection, I would push the foot into the hand. That's going to help you light up the spiral lines around the core of the body. And if you're binding, then I would, again, bind the hands and pull them apart, and you're going to get more activity in the trunk. So even if you just did that now, you would notice that incorporating hands pulling apart, something comes online in the trunk of your body. It's the spiral lines. Hint. Okay, so let's look at a couple of dysfunctions. And we've looked at quite a lot of dysfunction with the superficial back line, front line, these head forward postures. We looked at arches collapsing, and ankle range of motion limitation, and then pelvic tilting and things like that. So any and all of those could be, that's affecting the spiral line as well. And so, kind of like Donna was saying, you don't have to think about, well, which line. I was just showing you dysfunctions as they kind of came up. But, everything's affected by a foot dysfunction. Everything's affected by an ankle dysfunction. So, what I would say is sort of treat it like some kind of triage, right, in your body. Whatever seems to be the most out of balance, then just focus on that for a while. And then something else will probably come up when that has come into better balance. Donna also mentioned how, like, she felt like she had this calf cramping thing going on, and she worked on it for a little while. Next thing it was in her hip, and next thing it was in her back, and then next thing it was gone. So this is kind of what happens in the body when especially if you're working to change something, the body may give you some feedback, and things that seem like a problem are not a problem, but another problem shows up somewhere else. So this is just part of the adaptation response, and the body learning new patterns and breaking old patterns. So that's something I want to talk to you about in just a minute, is breaking through these old patterns. Like, what does that take? So, but first we'll just talk about some other kind of common dysfunctions, and this time we'll kind of focus on the side dominance a little bit more, because we all have a side that's dominant. So say if you're right-handed and you're strongly right-handed, and you throw right-handed and you right-handed, that is just your dominant side, then you're probably going to rotate that side towards your left hip. That's just what happens. And if you're a lefty, it's the same thing. Now, I know a lot of people who write with their left hand and shoot right. So, that might not be a bad thing at all. So the more habitually dominant you are on one side, then, obviously the stronger that pattern's going to be in your body, and probably the more you're going to need to do to try to balance that out, which is fair. Like, again, this is just body awareness, taking care of your body, just trying not to, overuse one side, underuse another side, and try to keep things in balance. Another thing we see in yoga, because we're not usually throwing things, except, blocks at the teacher maybe occasionally, but we often see like SI joint imbalances and things like that. So, we want to make sure that we know how to stabilize the pelvis, and that we allow the pelvis has to be allowed to follow spinal movement. So a lot of times we hear cues. Now I feel like I should have made a slide about this. A lot of times we hear cues where we have to keep the pelvis perfectly still and square to the front of the mat, say, or square to the side of the mat. And then we do some kind of rotation or whatever with the upper body, and that the hips are not allowed to move. That's just not how the body works. Like, even in walking patterning, when your right leg goes forward, your hip is going to go forward a little bit. It's going to kind of rotate forward a little bit, and then it's going to rotate back. So there's rotation on the transverse plane, and a little bit of rotation on the, there's rotation on the transverse plane, and a little bit of rotation on the sagittal plane too. So, these things have to be allowed to happen because that's how the body is built. Okay, so when SI joint problems show up, it could be because you're just not allowing the pelvis to follow the spine, or it could be because you're again just trying to get a bit more range of motion than is available there, especially if one foot is forward and one is back, or you're doing these sort of sides are doing opposing actions. So again, the importance of connecting the foot to the core encompasses your hip stability, right? Your hip and SI joint. That's why you want to think of it that way. You don't want to just, be moving from the hip itself or the pelvis itself. You want to be thinking of the foot all the way through to the core of the body, so that the fascia can transmit the tension, and you're not rotating just into one joint at a time, or two joints at a time, or something like that. So again, let your pelvis follow the spine. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples. Actually, there might be some there, so we'll talk about it there. Okay, so other things that can show up as issues, and again, we've seen this before, are the patellar tracking issues. So that's definitely a superficial front line issue, but also lateral line issue, spiral line issue. Okay, and it's important to train that organization and activation so that the knee uses its lateral stability. And the thing is, you must stay strong. If weakness comes in, or you're not very active or what have you, this is where these problems tend to show up the most. If you're using your knee, if you're bending and straightening, and you're pretty regularly exercising the knee, whether that's yoga or walking or running or stair climbing or squatting or whatever, you're not going to see as many issues. Sometimes these show up during growth spurts or something like that, where you've got a period of time where it's like the bones grew too fast, and now the tissue's really tight around the knee and things like that, and your range of motion is limited for a time. I think there's ways of getting through that too, without any surgery or medication or anything like that, just by making sure you're doing nice clean squatting, nice clean lunging, going for walks, those kind of things. We need to during development keep up, let our movement life keep up with our growth life, and sitting at desks is a terrible really terrible for kids' knees when they're growing. So, if you can change out of those positions as often as possible, that's a really good thing. Change sitting position, maybe go to standing, lots of movement breaks and things like that. All of these things are really helpful. Also, if you find that you're sitting with your legs folded under you, always to one side, that can cause problems. So, I said habitual rotation, habits and habitual patterns in your body are really often the cause of most issues. Weakness and then habitual patterns. Those are the two things that show up the most as the cause of various issues at the knee, at the hip, at the foot. So it's super important to keep people moving and moving out of their habits, breaking through their habits, noticing that they have a really strong habit. Okay, so
Donna has a question.
Okay, Donna, go.
Denise, can you hurt yourself by over trying to activate your lines? Can you hurt yourself? I'll tell you why.
Okay.
On this one picture that you have here, so the one where she's on, the foot is on. There's a muscle above, or tendons above your ankle bone, like on the outside. When you're activating it, I have a student who tells me that when she activates, she feels it in her core, and like pressing into her foot, dialing it out, but she feels a sharp pain right here on her ankle bone, just above the bone.
Well, that's the peroneus longus and brevis actually are both there, and they're both turned on with organization and activation. So she may have, through, again, walking patterns or what have you, she might have, I can't sort of draw it on here, but she could have like some like extra connective tissue built up there, or adhesions or something. It's not sliding smoothly. So I think that, using the yoga tune-up ball or something, rolling around those tendons. And I don't really mean rolling. I mean like using the ball to grip the tissue and then sliding the tissue or shearing the tissue while she points and flexes her ankle.
So on that outside, lay the ball on that for her?
And to follow those peroneal fibularis muscles all the way up the side and between that and the calf, all of that. So if she's learning a new pattern, she's probably going to get some feedback from her body. It's not going to hurt anything in terms of it. It's not going to break things, but she could feel some tugging if there's some like connective tissue adhesions there or something. Which could be if she has a habit of rolling in like this one, then it's kind of you're putting slack on the very tendons that are supposed to be under tension, to keep everything organized, activated, upward lifting.
So it doesn't have that. So it wouldn't be like being stronger when you're externally or like when you're dialing out, you're activating externally outwards, like your feet are going to go out. It wouldn't be like one side stronger than the other, like pressing in.
Yeah, definitely. One side is always stronger than the other.
Yeah.
So she might only have symptoms on one side.
She does.
And this is the thing. Like you might have symptoms on only one side, but unless like this is due to an injury or a surgery or something where something is anomalous on one side, there's usually a certain degree on the other side too. This happens a lot when you're working, like doing body work. Somebody will come in and complain about the right side, their right hip, say, but then when you're working on their left hip, they're surprised at how sensitive the opposite hip is too, because they weren't feeling the symptoms on that side. So one side may be in more trouble than the other, something like that. When you're learning a new pattern, you're going to probably feel something, right? Some kind of symptom, some kind of tugging, some kind of fatigue, something, because you're changing a pattern, and that's going to have a biological effect on your tissue. So, it's a matter of just sort of working through that to get a bit stronger. And as I say, it's often, weakness in the feet, or weakness in the muscles that stabilize the ankle, weakness in that whole, lateral line, spiral line. So, just building the awareness, then building a bit more strength. We're going to talk about some ways that we do that in a moment. And, that's the key. I mean, that's that's what it takes. That's what the human beings need to do, is we just have to stay with things, and we'll get stronger. That's how we're built. So yeah.
Good. I told her no pain, no gain. No, just kidding.
Use it or lose it. Maybe that one.
That's probably better.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to just talk about this picture a little bit, because so I'm right-handed, and if I work at a standing desk, even if my keyboard is straight in front of me, I tend to still roll my right shoulder forward a little bit. Okay, so that is, again, I'm activating that spiral pattern, because I'm right-handed. This is very common. If you sit at a desk, usually the keyboard is just to the side. It's not always directly in front of you, but it's usually going to be your dominant side is going to be forward a little bit. So again, I just want to, patterns that are very, very common, just be on the lookout for that. You're probably going to curl forward with your dominant side. Just something to see if that's happening for you. And then, if you play a musical instrument, that's why like so many movement therapies have been born out of the fact that people play musical instruments, because they can just like put their bodies in the most wretched positions, so that they can play their instrument well. So, violin is particularly challenging, but, even piano and things like that can be tricky. They build these patterns in the body because you need so many hours of practice and all of that. And then I just wanted to show like a couple of images here of this is better, kind of the wind up, right? Where you're gonna quickly tension in a long position the spiral line, and then you're gonna explode in the other direction, basically pulling all the structures of the spiral line back together. So you kind of, again, it's almost like a springboard throughout the entire spiral line is a possibility, just because of the direction of these fascial lines. So like these kind of cross body actions, throwing, swinging rackets and pucks and things like that are very much spiral patterns, and incorporate the spiral lines. So very fun. Okay, let's look at some of these. Okay, so yeah, goals in working with the practice. Again, remember dynamic stability is what we're building when we're, focusing on the spiral lines. And there's lots of ways of doing this. So I would think about just doing almost any regular posture, and then adding some kind of rotation. So you're changing kind of the plane, right? So just a basic balancing lunge, turning your body to the side and looking to the side can be, an interesting proprioceptive challenge. And I find that if you set everybody up with organization and activation in this lunge position first, right? So they know their great toes got to ground, pressing the knee out, press into the great toe on the back leg, and we haven't talked about the deep front line, but you're activating the deep front line and the superficial front line here. This is going to help you stabilize the pelvis, right? Because when you push this knee out, it's going to tuck the hip in and stabilize the pelvis. And then when you rotate, you'll actually be able to manage that position. Whereas if you didn't, I guarantee this knee would fall in and they'd start to crumble from their foundation. So setting up properly for these postures, and then challenging the posture. So you're, adding a spiral pattern. Now you're spiraling from your back foot through the pelvis, through to the opposite shoulder, right? And remember that this is her right leg is connected to her left thorax. So it's connected, but when she's spiraling like this, it almost looks like it's on the same line, right? So, but that is that cross-body connection. Same thing here. Okay, so she's got her left foot down, and then she's rotating open with the right thorax. That is her spiral line. That's one spiral line. This is more of a of a fun posture, just adding, some spirals. And again, she could be pressing into her hands, so you can feel that a little bit more. But I feel like the standing balances are really good. Again, proprioception maintenance is so important. But again, from an organization and activation, what's she doing here? She's pushing her foot into her hand and her hand into her foot. This is just going to give her so much activation through the trunk of the body and help her keep her pelvis in more advantageous position. Same thing here. Her knee is pressing against her arm's pressing back against her knee. That helps her roll her shoulder open. Just so many good ways of applying this organization and activation principle to stabilize postures. And you actually, it's like you feel your fascia singing. It's tensioned and you're breathing into it, and you know that all this good stuff's happening, piezoelectricity, mechanotransduction, you're birthing new connective tissue, you're tuning your instrument, you're balancing your electrical field. I mean, I could go on and on. It's super exciting stuff. So, but I did want to finish today with talking about, some of the ways we can get stronger. Okay, so working with spiral patterns can illuminate areas in the body that are kind of either they feel restricted, like you just don't have the same movement capability on one side versus the other, or it can feel out of balance, like you can balance on one side but not the other, or you feel a sense of weakness, like you want to collapse on this one side versus the other side, or maybe both sides. And these can be, really interesting challenge for not just your strength, but also your proprioception, and your connection with your body. So some of the things we can do to work on improving our capacity, so whatever that is, for balance or for strength, equal balance in strength on both sides, or better proprioception, anything like that. So just again, this is sort of a recap of things we've talked about before, but going through these fascial lines, we keep bringing up different dysfunctions and things like that. So I just thought, okay, let's just talk about what are the ways that we help the body to improve its function. Okay, and gotta say, we always organize and activate first. Okay, so if we're standing on the feet, we want to connect the foot to the core. If we have our hands on the ground, we want to connect the foot to the core. It's organization and activation at the hands, at the feet. We're connecting hands and feet to the core of the body. Okay, so that's always the first part. And there may be, if you're going to transition through your posture into different iterations of the pose, like from a basic pose to something that adds a spiral or something like that, then you want to keep checking in. Am I still organized and activated? Because that is, that's going to help you transition. It's going to help you sustain the pose. The next thing, so that one we're doing all the time. Next one is early in the practice, prime the fascia. So I mentioned this a number of times in the attunements, I'm sure, and it's something I say a lot in my classes. We're priming the fascia. If people are wondering why we're doing what we're doing, I say we're priming the fascia, especially early in the practice. So we're doing little practices that help us feel the body, just like I suggested to Nicoletta, something with head pressing into the hands and the hands pressing into the head. So just finding ways of lighting up the different fascial lines, doing some side bending so you can feel the lateral lines, doing some rotation so you can feel the spiral lines, deep front line. So doing different postures that just really highlight a specific line and help your students feel like they have mastery control over that line. They have a relationship with that line. They can feel that line. And then when they really need to incorporate that into the posture that they're doing, they can tap into that. So that takes practice. But as I said, I have people that practice a lot. They practice with me a lot. And they appreciate this idea of priming the fascia, doing, pretty simple postures, but when they feel their fascia, then they feel grounded in their body, and they feel confident that they're going to be able to do some of the trickier things that we might try to do later. So that, I think, is very important. And priming the fascia might be your whole focus if you're teaching seniors, or if you're teaching people who are new to the practice. You could just work with priming the fascia in simple postures for months, and people would be learning, they'd be reconnecting dots, and they'd probably remember those things, in life. So that's a good thing to do, especially if you're working with seniors, is get them to apply it to other things they do in their life. Okay, so priming the fascia. And so let me give you some examples of priming the fascia. Well, here's a couple. Pressing the feet into the hand, pressing the knee into the hand, doing a lunge pose and pulling the feet into the pelvis, doing a side bending, moon pose and feeling the lateral body, feeling the back body, doing plank or like upper push-up, one or the other, so they can really tap into the front body. So any posture or position or things you want to make up that just really feel like, it's obvious that what we're using, it's obvious what is helping us do this posture. Superficial back line, front line, lateral line, spiral lines, eventually deep front line. So, whatever you can draw their attention to that really makes them feel like, okay, I know where that is. I can feel that. So that's what priming the fascia does. And remember, it's not just that. Like, there's other things that are happening too when you prime the fascia, right? You're tensioning the fascia, making it more proprioceptively sensitive. So that's not just going on in their head, that's going on in the tissue as well, between the brain and the tissue. And it's also helping those tissues secrete some lubrication, so movement feels a little easier and more glidey. So, there's lots going on. So that's worth doing early in the practice. And then here's another experiment I want you to try with me. I just learned this one yesterday or the day before. So we're going to just take a super simple position. It's going to be standing. Sorry, guys. Standing. Okay, so you're going to just keep your upper body relaxed. And because we know that that's what we're going to do, we're going to stand on one foot and we'll organize and activate. Your other foot is going to just be held out in front of you as though you're going to take a step. Okay, so with your ankle bent and your toes drawing towards your knee. So you're just going to stand there. Try not to move. So if you set yourself up in a position, do not move anything from that position. So it's like you decided, this is my position. I'm going to stay right here. And I'm just going to keep talking, and you're going to just stay right there. Don't change anything. Let's just see how long you can stay there. So the concept we're working here is taking basic, sustainable postures and staying there for longer. And we're learning about that right now because we're just standing. This isn't even a yoga pose. We've just got our leg out in front of us as though we're about to take a step. There couldn't be anything simpler than this. This is a totally natural human being action. Anybody feel their muscles working yet? So if you were to stay here for, say, 5 minutes, we've only been here for maybe 1 minute. So can you imagine how challenging that would be? Have I made my point? Thanks, Donna. So if you want, you can do that on the other leg now. All I'm saying is that, and I did this with my class this morning because I just was so excited. We did, like, every posture we did, we held it for probably twice as long as we would ordinarily do it. I don't rush through practices either. I don't rush, but we held postures for a really, really long time. So I made sure that they understood, don't wrap your leg around your head unless you know you can stay there for 5 minutes. Well, we didn't stay there for actually 5 minutes, but long time. So we did really long holds. And see, the thing is, you're building something. We have to do this on the other side, so I keep making my point, okay? So now this time you're going to stand on the other leg and the other foot goes forward. So can you, right here, could you slump in this pose? Can you slouch when you're doing that? Try it. It's hard to appreciate it if you just do it for a second, but if you're trying to hold that for a while, you can't slump. You got to hold yourself upright or you don't have a chance. You don't have a chance of sustaining that. So that is the beauty of, the whole ladder and slide thing that we were talking about early in the course, is that you got to start people with simple, sustainable postures and keep them there for a long time so they can build up their proprioceptive ability and their strength. And that is actually just, here's the thing that I learned. It wasn't that. What I learned was that this is a really effective and profound pattern interrupter. So, we talked about order of progression and incrementally increasing loads. So this is all in line with that. But if you have like a really strong dysfunction in your body or pattern, you can change it by going into a new pattern and holding it for a long time. And it doesn't have to be an entirely new, like you don't have to figure out the secret pattern. You just do something really, really basic. Like you could do table pose and lift one arm and stay there for a really long time. Table pose and lift one leg and stay there for a really long time. Stand like we did with one foot out in front of you. Like Nicoletta, if you have some back weakness, did you find that when you stuck your foot out in front of you, it turned on your superficial front line? Yes. So hold it there for a really long time, and you're building the balance, that's going to give you balance between the front and back lines. So again, this is a really interesting thing to play with, and I would recommend maybe you do one or two postures with even advanced students where you just keep them there for a really long time, and just tell them that like, well, here's what I did. I really got into this morning. We went into postures for a lot longer. It wasn't 5 minutes, but it was probably a couple minutes. And we stayed there way beyond when they wanted to get out of the pose. And it gives you a chance for things to come up, mentally, emotionally, and you have then a chance to make a decision for yourself of how long you're going to be there, because you have to work with your body's past, right? Past injuries and issues and all of that. And you make the decision, when you come out of it, basically. So you want to see where your threshold is, where you're really at that place where you would really love to get out of it, and then just stay there a little bit longer. And that is what changes things. It's building, an inner strength within yourself, and it can help you change deeply ingrained movement patterns and even thought patterns. It is a pattern changer, a pattern interrupter. So that's something you might want to try. Just find simple positions and hold them for a really long time and just see what happens. I remember years ago we did a half-hour Tadasana practice. Standing in Tadasana for 30 minutes. And I learned so much in that 30 minutes. It was so interesting. I could identify all kinds of rotations in my body and weak spots and places where I wanted to give up. Oh, it was just so illuminating. So, again, these are things we can play with. And then the other thing I wanted to remind us about, because, some of the postures we do here in these spiral patterns, especially when we're standing on our feet, because they're so challenging, right? They have a strength challenge, a balance challenge, like a proprioceptive challenge, and then we might have one side weaker than the other and things like that. Can be so challenging. And oftentimes we're trying to get more range, right? Especially, we want to lift the leg higher, or we want to spin more, or whatever. To just, again, stay with it and activate at end range. Activation at end range, guys, is the way that you increase your range of control. All right. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up again, it may not be necessary with you guys because you've been kind of coming along this journey with me. But in yoga, most people want more and more range of motion. And we've been talking about how what we really want is range of control, because range of motion without control is kind of dangerous and not sustainable. So we want range of control. And the way we can develop range of control is by staying active at our end range. So again, this is where we come in with pressing the foot into the hand, pressing the foot into the floor, directing your energy upward. And in this posture, you're pressing the knee down, pressing into the hand, pulling back with the hand to kind of rotate out of the position. These are ways of activating at end range. So you're staying active. You're not pushing your body anywhere it doesn't want to go already. And you're staying active at that end range, just taking breath and knowing that you're building those tissues around your joints so they are going to be able to sustain you. You're going to have more range of motion, trust me, but you're also going to have range of control. So that's what we're all going for. So, just a little reminder of things we do naturally in yoga practice, very easy to incorporate, that improve our capacity. Always organize and activate. Do these fascial priming actions. Draw people's attention to what to feel, because sometimes if you just say feel, they don't really know what to feel. So I would recommend, directing them to feel the back body, feel the front body, feel the side body, and then sustaining postures for longer. I really would love to hear if you try that and what comes up for you. And then activation at end range. So some of the really, really easy tools to incorporate. And I was going to suggest too that, before Shavasana, it's always good to take a very mindful twist, because again, these spiral patterns are really important to maintain in the body. But we rarely rest in a spiral position. So it's good to take a few breaths, spiraling the body to each side. Whatever variety of spiral you want to do there doesn't really matter, but just so they can feel the spiral in their body. And spirals also, I do believe, have a kind of a magical quality as well. So that before Shavasana, again, is just a really great thing to incorporate. So that's our spiral lines. And remember that, there's days 19 to 21 of Activate Your Asana. Gives you some good ideas, little drills and small short practices for working with the spiral line if you want to just draw attention specifically to it. And then the spiral line attunement after the lesson. For practices that awaken the spiral line. But as we established early on, we're really using all the lines, but we might want to focus on one or two at a time, just so we learn about them, just so we can feel them a little bit more. Okay, so that's my suggestion. That's all I have for you, unless there's some questions. I think we do have a little announcement, because we got two, right? We got two new lesson summaries are live. So those are they proprioception? What's that? The nervous system and proprioception?
Yeah, and interoception.
Oh, okay. So we have two lessons, the nervous system and proprioception, and the nervous system and interoception. Those two lesson summaries are live now. So you can go to the lesson, and then you'll see the lesson summary up after that, which includes, some graphics, some text, some video, and they're kind of designed so that if you want to just read through the text and kind of get a general reminder of what was in that lesson, you can do that. But also, very concise little topical videos are included there. So you can just click on the video and, there's a short little blurb about that. Most of them are from coaching calls. And then there's, of course, some graphics and stuff from the coaching calls too. Some images and stuff that I used. So those are good reminders too. So again, just another layer of reinforcement. So that you can, because, I'm told that a lot of people buy online courses and then don't ever do them or whatever. And everything we have done with this course is like, we really want you to learn this. So we have like this vested interest in you guys actually learning this and being able to incorporate it in your classes, because we think your students need to know. So anyways, we're all about giving you the resources you need for that, and hopefully that is what's happening. So
Great. Denise, I have one question about the nervous system, but
Great.
You can just tell me to watch it, and if that's where the answer is. So I heard the other day a person having a nervous breakdown, and I'm not judging it by no means. My question was, what exactly, because I'm working with the nervous system myself, and I say that in my classes, and then just randomly someone tells me someone had a nervous breakdown, and I'm like, what the heck is a nervous breakdown that would land you in a hospital? I don't know what that is.
Well, I think nowadays it's more common to call it like an anxiety attack or a panic attack or something like that.
Well, that's what I would use, but I actually heard the words nervous breakdown.
Years ago, they used to call that kind of thing a nervous breakdown. It could, like, again, it's not a specific term. It's a term that could encompass anything from like a full psychotic episode, where somebody's like cannot function at all, to maybe a series of anxiety attacks leading to a panic attack, anything in there. I mean, generally it has to do with stress, some form of stress that's like an overwhelming trigger of some kind, maybe due to past experience or past trauma or something like that. But, I'm no psychological expert, but when they say, they're not really talking about, the peripheral nervous system or whatever, that we're talking about in this course. They're talking, usually that term always used to mean something more like a anxiety attack, or I guess even severe depression leading to a level of disability that, required medical care, maybe in a hospital or whatever. So, yeah. So it's not a specific term by any means. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions about the spiral line or comments? Or hi, Lorraine. How you doing?
Lee said in the chat, these coaching calls are getting better and better. I love repeating them. We know it is a lot of work. So Thanksgiving, I am grateful for this movement course and for you and Mark.
Lee just gave me a whole bunch of compliments. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but me and Mark, so we do appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we have a few more calls it goes just into the new year, and then I'm just like, well, I wonder what the calls are going to be after we've done all the lessons. That's going to be interesting. So we'll see. We shall see. But are you going to take off, Donna? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Hi, Sandy. I don't think I've seen you before here. Very nice of you to join us. Where are you coming from?
I'm in Lawrence, Kansas, and I'm listening while I vacuum and mop the studio. So that's why I usually have my microphone and video off.
Okay, cool. Good. Oh, well, I hope you find it entertaining and help you get your work done. Excellent. Okay, well, I guess we'll wrap it up. You guys you Americans are going into Thanksgiving weekend, right? Yeah. My son, we're Canadian. My son was born on Thanksgiving Day, so I'm very thankful for him. But his birthday doesn't fall on Thanksgiving Day this year. But anyways, so wonderful. Happy Thanksgiving, you all, and I'm very grateful for you guys being here, and thank you so much for questions and comments and all of that. So blessings. Appreciate you. Take care. We'll see you next time.